Do you have big goals and dreams, but repeatedly find yourself slipping back into negative patterns of behavior? Maybe you want to start a new hobby or build that physique you've always wanted, or maybe you plan to create a business in your spare time. When you start out on this journey, you are full of motivation, like though nothing in the world could stop you. You buy new outfits for the gym and you sign up for a year-long membership. Maybe you buy a new guitar because you want to learn music or singing lessons. Perhaps you pay for a course that's a few $100s and promises to show you the way to build that business you've always wanted to build. But soon this motivation begins to wane and you find yourself slipping back into the negative patterns that have always plagued you. The sudden surge of motivation you feel and the eventual collapse back into your old ways are both caused by the neurotransmitter dopamine. And understanding how dopamine influences our thoughts and behavior is key to breaking those negative patterns and crafting the kind of life that we truly want to live. Our dopamine system evolved over millions of years as part of our brain's motivation, domination, and exploration architecture. Dopamine is the reason the world exists the way it does today. Anytime man has looked at the horizon and wondered what lay beyond, dopamine was to blame. Anytime a human being has come across a problem and dealt with it with a creative solution, dopamine was there. Every king and queen that has ever conquered foreign lands, every genius whose discoveries have propelled us forwards, every artist whose creativity bordered on madness, were all driven by dopamine. The area of the brain where dopamine has the greatest effect is focused on something called extrapersonal space. That's neuroscience speak for what is out there, either beyond the horizon or at some point in the future. Dopamine helps us imagine and work towards these barely tangible possibilities. Higher levels of dopamine are also linked to what's called increased locus of control. And this is our perception that the actions that we take in our life will have an effect in changing our circumstances. Taken to the extreme, some people suffer with what's called delusions of grandiosity, where their dopamine levels are so high that they believe they can telekinetically control the environment around them or telepathically read other people's minds. But in its milder form, this strong external locus of control can help us in pursuing our dreams because we believe that we have the capacity to achieve them. Whenever you set a goal for yourself, you create an open dopamine loop. You're at the beginning of your journey and your brain gets flooded with dopamine in order to motivate you in pursuit of that goal. This is when you feel happiest, freshest, and most enthusiastic about the life that you are imagining building for yourself. When you achieve your goal, when you accomplish what you set out to accomplish, your brain releases another flood of the neurotransmitter dopamine. This closes the loop and acts as a reward for having worked towards and achieved your goals. It irons that process into your brain as a behavior that you should repeat. In fact, that surge of dopamine can be so big after achieving a big goal that we find ourselves in an almost depressed state once we've got what we wanted. What goes up must come down, and it's the same for our neurotransmitters. When dopamine drops again, we might find ourselves confronting feelings of emptiness. And couple that with the fact that we no longer have a goal to work towards or a purpose that is driving our actions. It can leave us in quite a negative frame of mind. It's important to be able to switch between the dopamine-driven goal pursuit style of living and the serotonergic-driven appreciation of what we have. In fact, I think it's far better in certain areas of your life to create overarching goals that are almost impossible to achieve, like wanting to get into the best shape of your life. No matter what you do in pursuit of that, there is always more that you can do. So that becomes your overarching goal over the course of your life. And each year, month, week, and so on, you're able to create smaller goals that help you work towards that eventual reality. Smaller goals are super important for maintaining both high levels of dopamine and high levels of motivation on your journey. Remember that dopamine spikes when you set your goal and when you complete it. But it's in that middle section where most people get lost. The dopamine begins to wane, as does your motivation, and you find the distance between where you are and where you want to be so big that it seems almost impossible to cross that gap. It's here, unfortunately, where most people give up. But had you broken your goal down into monthly, weekly, and even daily targets, well, now you have a path across that gap. Every day you are motivated to accomplish something that will bring you one step closer towards your ultimate goal. Are there ways you can elevate your dopamine naturally? Yes. What are the things that we can do and the things that we can avoid in order to keep our dopamine levels as high as possible? The first thing that we have to do is make sure that we get adequate sleep. During sleep, our brain rebalances all levels of our neurotransmitters, and it also clears waste metabolites from your brain cells. Adults need around 6 to 9 hours of sleep per night, depending on their age and the amount of energy they expend on a day-to-day basis. And there are certain things that you can do to massively improve the quality of the sleep that you're getting. So making sure that the room that you sleep in is cold enough that you're able to fall asleep easily. Ensuring there's a decent amount of airflow through your bedroom is also important and useful for helping you get a good night's rest. Try using blackout blinds or curtains to ensure that no light gets into your room whilst you are asleep. And finally, one of the best things you can do is to make sure that you get enough exercise during the day so that you are tired enough to have a good night's rest when your head finally does hit the pillow. I always find the 1-2-3 rule really useful. No screens 1 hour before bed, no water, no drinks 2 hours before bed, and no food at least 3 hours before bed. Diet and stress can both affect dopamine as well. If you look here, you can see dopamine synthesis pathway in the body. We start with phenylalanine, which is converted into tyrosine, which is converted into dopa, which is converted into dopamine, which can eventually be converted into epinephrine. Now, dopamine cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, so it has to be synthesized inside the brain, which means that you have to have the ingredients for dopamine in your body. They pass across into the brain, and then your brain creates dopamine from those ingredients. So one of the things we can do to increase dopamine is ensure that we have enough phenylalanine or tyrosine in our diet. Now, both of these are amino acids, which you'll find in abundance in things like chicken, legumes, beans, beef, pork, any sort of protein source that you like. If we consider the end point of the synthesis pathway, dopamine can be converted into epinephrine and norepinephrine, otherwise known as adrenaline and noradrenaline. And this conversion into epinephrine and norepinephrine can act as a sort of sink for our dopamine. If our body is having to create more and more of these chemicals, then we're going to reduce the supply of dopamine that we have available for the other jobs that we want to do with it. And one of the major reasons our body creates epinephrine is to deal with stressors. So chronic stress in this case can be a major driver for epinephrine synthesis, which will deplete our dopamine, which we don't want. So one of the major contributions you can do to your daily lifestyle to help prevent low dopamine levels is to reduce your stress as much as possible. How do we do this? By avoiding stressful situations. In the case where we cannot avoid stressful situations, by learning coping mechanisms that will help us deal with those situations. Maybe meditation, maybe regular exercise. These are both proven methods for dealing with stress. Exercise is also an incredibly potent dopamine stimulant. Usually a decent workout will cause a prolonged release of dopamine for up to 4 hours after the exercise is finished, which is incredibly useful for keeping us motivated and focused on the goals that we are trying to pursue. One of the easiest ways to take advantage of this is to simply incorporate walking into your daily routine. It's low impact, it's low effort, and it will help to regulate your neurotransmitters. Many famous writers have schedules that include exercise and long walks when they are writing their books. Haruki Murakami, I apologize if I've murdered that name, famous for his incredible works like Kafka on the Shore and Norwegian Wood, famously says that when he is writing a book, he spends around 4 to 6 hours a day writing, and he spends the rest of his time either walking, swimming, or long-distance running. He claims that the endurance he builds from the exercise he does when he's writing helps him to attain a sort of mesmeric state of creativity when he's working on his own projects. The scientific reality likely lies in dopamine, as his stringent regimen will result in elevated levels of dopamine and a more regulated brain, as well as making him tired enough to ensure that he gets deep, restful sleep every single night. So what are the key takeaways that you can start implementing into your life now in order to increase your levels of dopamine, increase your motivation, and ensure that the goals that you're in pursuit of, you actually achieve? Number one, break your goals down into smaller goals. You want to be closing dopamine loops on a regular basis so that your brain is giving you those regular rewards through elevated spikes of dopamine. These mini wins on a daily or weekly basis will help to create really positive momentum that will push you through the grind period that all of us face when we're in pursuit of certain goals. Make sure you're exercising regularly. This can be as low impact as walking, and the more you do, the better. Of course, if you're going into much higher intensity exercise, then you will need to limit it in order to make sure that your body is okay. But low impact exercise, such as walking, slow jogging, these sort of things can be added into your routine at strategic times to create elevated dopamine throughout the day. And finally, make sure that your sleep is on point, that you're getting 6 to 9 hours of deep, restful sleep every evening by following the tips I mentioned earlier.